The ache in his bones wasn't real, but Fool felt it anyway. Sitting down was a road well traveled by this point, but that didn't make it smooth. He could still feel the grate in his joints that matched the grate of the gravel he sat on, even if the feeling in the bones wasn't real. Thanks to the system and its tweaks, he looked as if he was in his early 30s and performed as if he was a superhero in his late teens. However, the body still remembered. Coming up on 70 years of rough living and poor self-care, a couple of years of awesome couldn't entirely stop the momentum of neglect he'd built up. His muscles felt warm and liquid. The fight had been hard enough to make him move. He rolled his shoulders and closed his eyes for a moment. Remembered the good bits. A sharp claw that had almost nailed him, and the rushing joy of the pirouette he'd spun into, that had turned into a leap and a smashing downward blow. The heavy blow from the body of the beast that had driven him back, hard, and the brief flicker of rage had made him grit down and shove back. Fool should be bruised, battered, dead if he wanted to really think about it. Instead, he was looking out over his favorite valley, enjoying the contrast between the body that was his now and the body he'd used up getting to the stage in his life. The sun was warm, and even if the world had changed for the worse, he was still in a better place. Didn't mean he could completely shake off the old life, but he was getting better all the time at embracing his second chance. Maybe that was the difference. He'd lived a full life, lived to feel the regrets for all his mistakes. Maybe that made it easier for him to see the opportunity, having come from a place of pain and loss. If someone had just gotten a new body, that was a dream come true, but if they hadn't seen the crippling emotional pain the old one would have caused them in the years to come, maybe the gift might feel a little hollow. More likely, though, Fool had just forgotten what it was like to have a fresh young brain that hadn't been through the ringer yet. With a final shake of his wrists, he turned to see how his partner was doing. Jackal was carefully wiping the gore off his outfit, sporting a cheery grin. Fool wasn't entirely convinced by it. There was a hollowness behind the smile, one that had been sneaking its way into Jackal over the last few months. They hadn't talked about it. At first, Fool had figured the big man was tired, but now he was getting the sense that Jackal was wondering where all of this was going. Fighting monsters and working for a secret organization was fun and all, but even Fool could feel it was getting old. It was a living, but it wasn't a real full life by any stretch of the imagination. There wasn't much either of them could do about it. That didn't stop Fool from trying to cheer up his friend in his own way. "You missed a spot," he said. That at least got a raised eyebrow from Jackal. "Do you want a face full of bug guts? Because that's how you get a face full of bug guts." Fool couldn't stop the laugh from bursting out of him, and the grin that shone on Jackal's face in response was a proper one, from the heart. "No," Fool said, flopping down on his back for a moment. "And sorry, I didn't mean to splash you." Jackal barked out a short laugh and sat down next to Fool, after relenting and using a cleansing spell to get rid of the rest of the goo. The remnants of the giant insect lay scattered about on the ground in front of them. The thing was huge, but even so, an errant gust of wind was enough to lift one of its wings a respectful distance up in the air. It had taken them longer than they'd expected to bring down the beast. It hadn't been a butterfly when they'd found it. When they tracked down the rampaging beast that had been carrying off the local livestock, it had looked like a giant segmented caterpillar, almost like a beetle. It was swift for all its bulk and had led them on a merry chase down the valley and up a mountainside. The transformation had been its final ace in the hole. Just as they'd knocked its health all the way down, it had curled up into a ball and formed a hard shell all around itself. It had taken most of Fool and Jackal's combined attacks to crack that shell. They'd attacked with desperation, sensing that something far stronger would come out if they gave it time. And they'd been right. They'd finally cracked the shell seconds before the transformation into the beast's flying form had completed.